We're joined now, excuse me, we are joined now on the programme by Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. Mr Regev, good to see you this evening. I wonder if we might start, indeed, I wonder if we might start with the video and the photographs released onto social media, some of which were in Stuart's report there, showing dozens of men, some bound in blindfold, stripped to their underwear, and we believe now at least some of that filmed by IDF members. What was the purpose of the exercise that was going on at that point in that part of Gaza?
First of all, remember it's the Middle East and it's warmer here, and especially during the day when it's sunny, it's to be asked to take off your shirt. It might not be pleasant, but it's not the end of the world. And as your report said, we are looking for people who would have concealed weapons, especially suicide bombers with explosive vests. We have to make sure they're not wearing those. It's unfortunately a necessity in the situation we're in. But of course, we were rounding up people who were suspects. We have lists, we have intelligence information of people who were involved in the atrocities on October 7th, the people who stormed across the border and butchered our people, who raped, who murdered, who burnt people alive, who machine gunned the young people at the open-air concert. You know, they filmed a lot of the material themselves. They put it up on social media. There are also different security cameras that took pictures of faces. There's intelligence information. Anyone involved in that sort of atrocity against our people will be brought to justice.
Indeed, but the fact that some of those who were taken in that particular incident have now been released suggests that they were not members of Hamas. And whilst you were entitled to round people up in that manner, what the IDF is not entitled to do under the Geneva Convention is breach the Third Convention, which you did, didn't you, when you filmed them in those positions.
So once again, I don't think we're talking about formal material that was released, and we have to look to how the video did.
If it proves to have been filmed by the IDF, that's neither here nor there. Neither is the temperature in the Middle East right now.
I understand. But I think that the important thing here is to remember these are military-aged men who were arrested in a combat zone. And as you've reported, people have already been released. We have no intention of keeping innocent people in custody.
Which I agree with. And I'm sorry to press you on this point, but if people have been released because they are not members of Hamas, if this was filmed by the IDF, it is a clear breach of the Geneva Convention, is it not?
So once again, we have to look into where the video came from. It's not official video that was released by the State of Israel.
If it were filmed by the IDF, as I just said, it would be a breach of the Geneva Convention, would it not?
So I'm not familiar with that level of international law. I know in the past, prisoners of war have been filmed. Often that's good because families can identify people. But as it is a breach or not, I'll have to check with my legal department.
Well, it is. But just on what has been taking place at the UN Security Council today, we of course heard from Antonio Guterres. He said this: civilians in Gaza are being told to move like human pinballs, ricocheting between ever smaller slivers of the south without any of the basics of survival. Which part of Mr Guterres' statement there is untrue?
He's totally wrong. And he's been wrong for quite some time. He's already called for a unilateral ceasefire already a month ago. And had we agreed then, we wouldn't have had a single hostage out, you know, because we stood firm and we said only a ceasefire in the framework of release of hostages. Hamas finally agreed to that. They caved in, and we got 110 people out. Had we listened to Guterres, we wouldn't have had seen people get out, hostages who were held by Hamas, including more than 30 children. And you remember the pictures. Those children were reunited with families after 50 days of ordeal in captivity. They'd all still been held by Hamas. Had we agreed with his advice and agreed to a unilateral ceasefire a month ago.
But on the statement that I just...
strategically... if you'll allow me, he's wrong strategically because he's calling for a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power in Gaza.
Indeed, but on the statement that I just read to you, in the statement that I just read, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. On the statement that I just read to you,
news again, talking about another round of fighting. There is no solution with Hamas in power.
That is your position, but I'm asking you which part of the statement that civilians in Gaza are being asked to move around the south, ever smaller slivers of the south, without any of the basics of survival, which part of that is untrue?
So he's just putting a negative approach on something that should be seen positively, that we're urging civilians to leave areas of combat because we don't want to see them get in harm's way. We don't want to see them get caught up in the crossfire between the IDF and the Hamas terrorists. And so we're asked them to vacate specific areas which we know are full, where we expect there to be intensive combat. I mean, we've been losing fighters. We've been taking out Hamas terrorists.
I understand Israel's...
It's humanitarian to ask civilians to leave such areas.
I understand your opposition to what is being said by the UN Secretary-General. I get that. But it is not only the UN Secretary-General that is raising concerns, not simply about the treatment of civilians, for example, in the footage that we've just saw, but the deaths of civilians. The UK's ambassador to the United Nations described the scale of civilian deaths as shocking and that they need protected. This is an ally of Israel saying this, and for a diplomat to say that at the UN Security Council of all places, you, Mr Regev, understand very, very well the power of diplomatic language. To describe the death toll among civilians as shocking must mean that it is rather more significant than that.
No, I agree. I'm also shocked by the deaths, and we have to ask, why is it happening? Because while Israel is urging people to leave combat areas and not to get caught up in the crossfire, Hamas has had the opposite policy of not allowing people to leave, even at gunpoint, of demanding that they remain because they want Gaza civilians as a human shield for their war machines. Why else have they built their military machine under civilian neighborhoods? Of course they want the civilians to stay, so they'll get killed. From a Hamas's point of view, every civilian death is a propaganda victory.
But Barbara Woodward's criticism of Israel's actions right now, the UK's ambassador to the United Nations, is not limited to that. She also picks up on Israel's plans to build, yet again, illegally on the West Bank. She says, let's be clear, settlements are illegal under international law. They present an obstacle to peace and they threaten the physical viability and delivery of a two-state solution. Now, you may well disagree or agree with parts of that statement, but it is true, isn't it, that you are being criticised at the highest levels right now for the way in which, by your allies, for the way in which you're prosecuting this war.
So I would remind my friends in the British government, and I have many friends there, that in Gaza, as you will recall, as was reported on Sky, we took down all the settlements in 2005. We took out every last settlement. And did that help us make peace with Gaza? Unfortunately,
well, they were illegal.
Not. This is not, when you're dealing with a group like Hamas, it's not about what borders the Jewish state has. They don't think we have a right to exist in any borders. They are a ferocious enemy of peace. And it's for them, Tel Aviv is a settlement. For them, all of Israel is an illegal settlement. They believe every Jew should be killed. That's the point.
Mr Regev, good to talk to you this evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Now,